Thank you, Deborah. Um, yeah, it's a privilege to be at Shangri-La, actually. It's a lovely place. Um, People often ask, why did it take so very long for Shangri-La to open the bedroom to the public? And I'm starting off with this lovely, one of our fancy Linnie Morris publicity images, which shows the bedroom from the outside. And the story really begins with fixing the roof, because you don't want to do anything on the inside until you fix the roof. And there was a long history of failed attempts to patch the original roof. And so finally, I think about 2010, the decision was taken to really just take the whole roof off and replace it, which meant dismantling the Jolly Pavilion you see up there and completely replacing everything structurally and membranes and everything. So this work was finished I think at the very end of 2011 or beginning of 2012, just before I started working here. And it was, I think in the fall of 2012 when discussions really got underway about what we were going to make of the Mughal suite. And it was about that time when Deborah asked me if I wanted to be project manager. And I said yes. And then I became that guy. The one with the clipboard, with his nose and everybody else's business. But actually, it gave me a wonderful vantage point from which to watch everything that went on in this project. And that's what I want to share with you a little bit today. As you can imagine, it was quite a complex project, and I think more than any other room at Shangri-La or any other space at Shangri-La, we had the opportunity to be quite comprehensive about taking good care of all the elements in the space. And so there's a really big cast of characters involved, and I'll try to mention as many as I can. Apologies to anyone that feels a little left out, but certainly my gratitude to everybody who worked on this project for making it happen so smoothly. So, conservation lecture. So you get a lot of before and after pictures. So here's a few before pictures. The Mughal suite includes, of course, the bedroom, the bathroom, the dressing area, and her closet, her walk-in closet. I don't think I've heard anybody say, gee, I miss the yellow. Right. So one of the most important elements in the Mughal suite are these open-work marble doors and windows. They're called generically Jolly. These are fabulous things. The open-work doors are about 500 pounds, the marble, and they glide almost effortlessly, or they should glide almost effortlessly on these wonderfully purpose-designed tracks. Everything is fitted in these bronze frames that are then anchored to the ferroconcrete building. And when we started work, unfortunately, many of them weren't working very well. They were sticky. Some of them didn't close properly at all. The screens were quite in disrepair, and many of the latches and things that go with them were broken. We were seeing things like this. This is a windowsill with a split. So that tells you that something is going on underneath, and the obvious, the usual suspect. There were suspected rusting fittings that were expanding and causing deformation of the bronze. So how do you find out? You take a window apart, right? So on the upper left, you see some of the good people from Constructors Hawaii who handle all of our construction issues, and they were fabulous in this project. And the gentleman peering out of the window on the right is Paul Thompson, a kind of mechanical engineer who has helped out Shangri-La and many other museums and sort of quirky projects here in Honolulu. He makes things, solves these mechanical problems. He's very patient and willing to take on almost anything. I was quoted in the Hanaho article as saying that the project was, what did I say, a horrible ordeal. or something like that. The whole project wasn't a horrible ordeal. It's just taking these windows apart was a horrible ordeal. And they weren't really made to come apart easily. And so there was a certain amount of physical violence involved. And we tried to be as discreet as we could, and we did actually get the first window apart and found these rusting brackets right where you would suspect them, underneath the splits. So we had two windows that had the same problem, and we all put our heads together, and it dawned on us that it would actually be easier on the second window to tunnel through the concrete to get to the iron rather than disassemble the window, and that's what we did. And it worked beautifully. When we got down to this part, you can just see that rusty bracket right there, and the constructors guys took all this off, and there's these few little pieces. Oh, one other thing is you can sort of see this, how it bows up a little bit right there, right where you'd expect it to. And so it still wasn't going down. There was one little piece of iron in there, and I got in there with a skinny chisel. I popped it out, and it just kind of went tonk. It's like, oh, okay, we're done. You know, it was nice to see this kind of relax back into position, and you know, then the window worked perfectly. And so we replaced all the rusty brackets with new stainless steel, looking very voluptuous there in this photograph. Filling in the concrete is quite easy. Everything anchored with stainless and epoxy resin underneath. So we had some of the same problems with the doors. We found that the jambs down at the bottom were being buckled out, which prevented them from closing, and some of the thresholds were buckling up, and we had to do the same procedure. Each door is a little bit different. And here you see our operations manager, Bill Miyagi, managing an operation, helping to take out one of the door jambs, which, you know, right where you would expect it, we found lots of rusting metal, all of which had to be cut out. You see the pieces here, patched with new stainless, everything primed and painted before we could reassemble. Again, our lovely, this is one of the door jambs with its old brackets and our lovely new stainless steel brackets. On the inside, we started to see, or we noticed some phenomena where this orange stone trim baseboard, which is actually a beautiful polished sandstone, was buckling out, preventing doors from closing, and in fact creating a lot of stress on the marble and sending out some radiating cracks. And so we had no choice but to take off some of the sandstone. And what we found was it had been installed in a very traditional kind of 19th, 20th century way, early 20th century way, with plaster of Paris and little copper clips holding it in place. Unfortunately, well, in this combination, the studs that support the walls are all steel. And plaster of Paris is like a sponge. It loves water. And here by the sea, it you know, stays wet all the time. And so it caused the studs to rust, but it was so tight in there was no place for the rust to go. So it created this tremendous pressure. Again, nothing to do but open it up, dig out the rust, cut out the rusty steel, make a series of patches, prime and paint everything, and then put the stone pieces back. And I actually put them back using the same system, but leaving enough space so that should something rust again, it won't create this tremendous pressure. We didn't have to do that all over the room, and there is some evidence that it may be happening somewhere else, but at least we know now how the pieces are put together and what we can do, take them apart and get them back together safely. Another funny thing, every one of these doors comes with a sliding pane of glass and a sliding bug screen. And they're beautiful things. They're all, you know, they got little latches, and the screens are held in the frames, excuse me, held in the frames. There's like a channel that runs around the perimeter of the frame, and the screen goes inside, and then a little tube of metal pushed in. It's called a spline to hold it in place. Okay, that's nice. On two of these screens, you couldn't position the screen in any way so that you could get at the spline to replace the screen itself. They were just designed that way. And the only way that we could get at them was to cut a hole in the wall. You see there's Paul, constructors, and Bill, and pull the screen out through the wall. That's the fireplace, actually. And of course, we had to take off some of the sandstone there again. Okay, so we cut holes in the wall. We took advantage of the moment, though, to actually kind of redesign the screen and make it slightly smaller. So next time, it'll be accessible, and you can rescreen these things without having to cut a hole in the wall. And screen, this voluptuous screen arrived, and everybody, we had a hard time finding something that would serve as a spline, but Paul found something, and then who knows how to do this kind of work anymore, but we had people from Ali Glass, there's a plug, who came out and said, oh yeah, we can do that, and they did, and we got new screens. Of course, electrical work, we had the opportunity to rewire, reposition some outlets, install some new electrical work, and that involved cutting more holes in the wall. It's always a little, another hole in the wall. But it was a great opportunity, and just speaking of electrical work, when you go in the Mughal suite, you see that it's rather dramatic. There's these uplights in the coves and lights in niches and things like that. And there was very little that we added to the lighting scheme. This was the lighting scheme that was original to the room. In fact, oops, too many buttons. This is a shot of the fluorescent lighting in the bathroom in the cove up underneath, and very early to have fluorescent lights in this space. So we didn't modify this much at all. We went LED, which is sort of a bit of a challenge in and of itself, but it looks, the LEDs these days look very warm, and you wouldn't hardly notice unless somebody told you. So in these kinds of projects, you always get to this point where you stop sort of tearing things down and start putting things back. And it was a great, pleasure to see the plasterers come in and do this wonderful work. Here you can see those big holes in the wall on either side of the fireplace, all smooth, and one of the electrical cuts being covered over. And after that, you get to have the painters in. Now, the color you see up here is actually a primer. And the idea was that it would help show off the color that you see today. And we did due diligence and took samples, and Barbara Scheidler, Barbara, our architect from Mason Architects here today, I took the samples, and she looked at them under a microscope and developed the sequence of different colors of paint that the bedroom had been painted. And what I think you understand from visiting the Mughal suite, that we wanted to kind of roll the clock back to the earliest manifestation. And so we tried to match the color, the earliest color in the sequence. And that's what you see today. On top of that was some white. And then, what was it? It was white. Oh, and then we had a moment of turquoise. This very strange turquoise, which didn't last very long. And then there were two yellows. And in fact, the yellow before we started working was even brighter than the one that we saw when we started. So that was pretty straightforward. Interesting thing about the bathroom, though, it was never any other color than what you see. It had only ever been painted once. It was linseed oil-based paint, and it had a thin wax coating on it. And so as linseed oil ages, it gets yellow, and so it was looking quite splotchy. So we cleaned off as much as we could, got a good sense of the color, matched it, and painted it that color. And Deborah and Barbara did most of the color matching. And we went through how many, 10 swatches for that color, trying to get it just right and looking. And finally, the one that was chosen had this kind of greenish tinge to it. So having done all that, I'm looking through the notes, I'm looking for something, a reference to something that had nothing to do with the bathroom, and I see a kind of punch list that had been written just prior to the completion of the house, and one of the items on the punch list was paint Miss Duke's bathroom pale green. It's like, yes, got it, all right. This was after we'd kind of settled on that color, so it was very gratifying to kind of find, oh yeah, okay, we're on the right track. Yeah. Right? Okay, so I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and enough about infrastructure, and talk about some of the objects that we treated in advance of opening this to the public. It's hard to say how many objects we treated. It's well over 200 objects, groups of objects, architectural features, and every one of them, we did our usual conservation procedure where we did photographs and wrote up conditions and wrote down exactly what we did and documented it very well. It's hard to say how many because, for example, we wanted to bring 2 lamps back from the Honolulu Museum of Art for the display in the Mughal suite, which means I had to treat 2 extra lamps to replace those. And then a number of things sort of were treated but didn't make the final cut. Some things were swapped in and out. So, and most of these treatments were done by myself, along with several conservation interns. Kat Harada, Kat said she might come today, but I guess she didn't make it. But we'll see some pictures. Several conservation interns, terrific conservation technician Gilbert Martinez, who's in the back over here. Say hola. And really, some of the work started in 2012, actually. It took quite a while. So one of the classes of materials that we had to deal with are lamps. Something like 26 hanging lamps in this little affair. Those in the bathroom, dressing area, these big globes in the bedroom, which were there from the beginning. They appear in the earliest photographs that we have of the bedroom, of which this is one. The globes, 2 of them had been in the museum for quite a long time, which is a much cleaner environment, and they'd had some attention before they went. One of them ended up in our basement storage, and one of them was hanging the entire time with a lot of exposure. So they all had different states of preservation, and the goal was to get them all to be about the same, and I think we did a pretty good job. Lots of colored lamps, colored glass lamps with their little brass fittings, all of which were incredibly filthy and corroding like mad. So we marched right through those. Gilbert enjoyed that a lot. Deja vu, deja vu. We also had some table lamps. These are a pair of silver table lamps, which silver here at Shangri-La, it doesn't tarnish. Tarnish is usually associated with silver sulfide corrosion. What we get here is silver chloride corrosion. And it has to do with our airborne particles, aerosols from the sea and from the VOG. And you can see how it accumulates on sort of up-facing surfaces, creating this incredibly dark layer of silver chloride. But they cleaned up real well. So, right, and there they are, sitting on the little vanity, which we were fortunate enough to have. That's the piece from the 1930s that sat in that spot in the dressing area, which is supposed to be a smooth segue to furniture that we worked on in this project. Anyone who's visited Shangri-La realizes that the house is just full of this mother of pearl decorated furniture, and in between there are all these white metal wires, which are probably a debased silver. They're a little intimidating, and some of our furniture consultants even looked at them and said, "Don't even try." But we didn't feel that way. I wanted to try and figure out a way to stabilize these things, make them presentable, and then make them sufficiently robust so that they could be cleaned regularly. And this would, slow down the corrosion and slow down all the other degradation that comes with these things. And so we started small. We started on one of these little tables, and that was I and Kat Harada did this work, developing systems for adhering the loose pieces, manipulating and rebedding the wires, which were kind of corroding themselves right out of their little channels, and developing coating systems that are stable, hopefully things that we could undo if we had to, hopefully we don't have to, and that would be renewable and just workable. So yes, lots of little wires, and all of us have gotten very proficient at laying them down and manipulating them and adhering them, as well as consolidating them. That is, applying acrylic resins, in this case, to protect them and adhere them. Little pieces of mother of pearl. We've gotten very adept at. There were two big boxes in the basement here at Shangri-La of little pieces of things that had fallen off over the years, and the staff was very good about putting them in envelopes, sometimes writing where they came from, sometimes not, but saving them. And we had a terrific intern come in last year and reorganize this so that it's very easy now to go to the fragments collection and zero in on this type of thing, and now we can find these kinds of things. I think that was one from the basement, right, Gilbert? That little piece, that's one that we snagged out of there. Some of the pieces had some insect damage. And this is one of these big chests of drawers, which was ignominiously jammed in a little back area of a closet for many years. Don't know when it last saw probably last saw the light of day in the 1980s when it was fumigated. But that was after quite a bit of damage had been done. These areas were just basically a shell with nothing inside. So I think you can even see a little pile of insect frass right there. Oh, this was a fragment, actually, that came out of the fragment collection in the basement. And once I started working on these, I said, oh, I know where that piece is. So all of those had to be injected, again, developing a kind of mix of a nice inert material that would be sufficiently robust so that if somebody touched it, it wouldn't stick their finger in it, nice and stable. This is that charming little chair that you see in the corner of the bedroom. Another interesting project in that this chair came to us, I think, from Doris Duke's New York apartment. Is that correct, Deborah? Something like that. It was one of these pieces. She bought lots of this mother of pearl decorated furniture and had it in all of her homes. And after she died, a lot of it came here. But in researching for the project, I actually found a photograph of that chair in the dressing room. You can just sort of see it. So it was here, and then it went away, and now it's back. And it was in terrible shape when we started out. And the silk upholstery was on its last legs anyway, but prior to starting the project, or just as we were getting started, one weekend a myna bird flew into the bedroom, and nobody knew it was there. And so it got locked in for the weekend, and when we came in on Monday, there was sort of evidence of myna bird everywhere, and a dead myna bird. And so the silk got pretty badly spattered, and so it was hopeless. So this is our textile consultant, Ann Svensson. When she came on one of her visits, we said, okay, we need to reupholster this chair, and the curator, Sharon Littlefield, said, I'd like to have this in the exhibit. Okay, so we worked on the chair, got it all cleaned up, and Anne was looking around trying to, what could we upholster this with? And she actually found a piece of the same fabric. So this is like the before aging, or this is before aging and this is after, but she found a piece of the same fabric that was large enough so that it could be reupholstered in the exact same silk that it had been. So, it's wonderful when these things come together. And again, there's Senor Gilbert and Anne. So there are lots of missing bits on the mother of pearl furniture, and we devised ways of filling the losses with a nice inert material. And then, you can do wonders with a little paintbrush. So actually, these have been holding up really well, and we're very happy with how that's worked out. And you can see in this archival photograph, there's our little tables. This is one of the earliest photographs we have of the bedroom. Those two little cranes, which were treated by a consulting conservator, and these little miniature paintings, all of which we managed to bring back, and as well as these settees. Now, the settees didn't survive very long. They were replaced with something, or modified and then replaced by the 1940s. And we had them reconstructed based on these kinds of photographs, thanks to Barbara's staff. And we also had these prints. The originals are auto-degrading and don't look very nice, but we had wonderful facsimiles made. And it was due to the diligence of Maya Clark and Sharon Littlefield. They went through many, many different printing techniques and a couple of firms and came up with a really good result. And also Maya deserves credit for steering the reproduction of these things through. But it's nice to be able to get so much of the original material back up and on view. Another class of objects that we treated for display are her archaeological 18th and 19th century glass, which are on display in that little passage that leads to the adjacent room. And these, were in horrible condition. She was actually collecting these very early on, and you see them sometimes in photographs in the bathroom itself. There are these two cabinets that you don't really see when you're standing at the door, mirrored cabinets. And then in that niche in the passage, we brought in our glass consultant, conservator Steve Koob, to work on the hard pieces, and then I and the interns worked on the other ones. Another class of objects that are on display are these enameled gold pieces. And I don't know what this means, but I think every single piece of enameled gold in the collection had been dropped at some point. And there were a lot of points of impact, and when you drop a piece of metal with enamel on it, the enamel kind of wants to shoot off. But fortunately, a lot of it was saved. And this wonderful box, which is on display, unfortunately, you kind of have to get down and look up to see the underside, but they saved all the splinters of glass, and we were able to reintegrate those. That's Kat Harada's hands. This little peacock boat had been dropped and all the enamel off the front, but we were able to bring that back. And then there are these gem-encrusted jade vessels, which are really glorious things. And the literature is full of claims about how they're manufactured with ultra pure gold. Well, ultra pure gold isn't gonna tarnish like this. So I think there's a little some variation in the alloy, shall we say? But many of our pieces were quite dark, and it was a delight to see them become bright again. Thousands and thousands of teeny tiny cotton swabs. Daggers. There are a number of daggers in this collection. These are two that are on display. Several others were treated but didn't make the final cut. Like most metals here, they'd undergone some corrosion, and it was a real treat to see them jump back to life. Where are all these things going? Well, two vitrines, this one and this one in the passage, we wanted to keep and had them refurbished. We had them, the doors taken off and repaired and cleaned, and new glass and new locks when necessary, painted, of course. We had new interiors that are all nicely sealed, and they became part of the collection. I think you're all aware that we didn't include a bed in the display, and so we had this wonderful niche. So a new freestanding pedestal case was designed to show off the Mughal jewelry. One thing we did introduce into the room were two vitrines over here, again to display the Mughal jewelry and the gems and the enameled gold, and those actually do have lights in them. So that's really the only new lighting elements that we injected. So this is a very complex sort of operation, designing and populating vitrines. So there's Barbara and Bobby Marcos, who many of you know, and his right-hand man, Pat Driscoll, at one of our meetings, trying to decide and plot out what exactly needed to be done. We knew that this vitrine, we wanted it to be upholstered red. And so we needed to find some fabric, and we wanted to kind of match it. So I went to take a sample of this, the existing, which was quite feeble at this point, and I started picking at it. It's like there's nothing behind here. And I just grabbed it and ripped a piece down. It turns out there was a speaker back there. And it was part of a central music system. It was like an incredible modern thing when the building was built. And Deborah, knew that there had been other speakers around the house, but didn't know that there was one back there. I think Maya wrote it up and posted something about it, but we documented it, and it's actually back in behind the vitrine. There's the door of one of those niches getting ready to go back in place. This is Dave Kemble, who, from the Bishop Museum, who helped us design our new exhibition space. It's in the closet. And of course, you have to go through a whole bunch of mock-ups and discussions and, lighting, and this is one of those moments. No, a little to the left. A great deal of praise is due to Sharon Littlefield, our consulting curator, who has been associated with Shangri-La for many, many years. She was central to a lot of the decision making in this whole production. She and Deborah, and these people are all down in the basement vault as she and our mount maker, Denise Fordham, are setting out one-to-one mock-ups of how the vitrines are going to be arranged. Nothing like layout by committee, right? It's like, no, a little to the left. No, it should go a little to the right. But I'm just sort of kidding. So this is Napua Germano, our housekeeper, who is here today. It's Leah, and it's Deborah, and Carol, and Maya Clark, and Jamie, so all familiar faces from our staff. Everybody played a part in this production. And actually what they're all looking at is Sharon standing over here talking. And so this is sort of the heat of the battle with Bethany Bannister Andrews and Denise doing actual installation. Oops. Right. Sorry. What's all this then? This is Kat Harada and Gilbert, and what they're doing in very dramatic fashion up there. It's not interpretive dance. It's actually they're washing the silk that goes in these vitrines. Now, these vitrines, they're not super tightly sealed, but they're very well sealed. And one has to consider very carefully every single material that goes in there and how it's going to react with the things that are in that microclimate, because it sort of amplifies. And the gases, if it's off-gassing, the gases collect, and it could be very damaging. And so the red textile and the silk, we had it tested. It turns out that is for off-gassing in an enclosed environment, and it turns out it was, so we tried it after washing, and it was much better. Certainly good enough for the kinds of things we were putting in, but we did have to wash all this silk. And in the bottom, you see the results, these beautiful displays, which you've seen in the Mughal suite. The other ones are glass pieces in these lovely glowy niches. They had lights on inside them originally. We just kind of, Bobby Marcos and his team reconfigured to do these very discrete LED strips, which is kind of magical. I don't think anybody thought that this was going to be so kind of special looking when we were originally designing it. And then this is the vitrine with the speaker behind. So, changing subjects again and getting back to architecture a bit. As you can imagine, the stone needed some attention, particularly the floors, and particularly the floor of the bathroom. I think this rather speaks for itself. It's a partially clean photo. And what did we clean it with? Cleaning stone is kind of an interesting operation, and one has to take into consideration a number of factors. One being, particularly in this case, is that the floor is much, much dirtier than the walls, and we wanted to get them back in balance, right? And so in advance of undertaking this, we did a whole testing program, testing several cleaners. But you don't just test the cleaners, you have to consider how long they're going to be on the surface and what dilution you're going to use them at. And you do this incrementally, and we were very lucky, or not lucky, but I'm very happy to say there was a commercial product on the market that I was familiar with, which is designed for taking these kind of organic accretions off of polished marble. It's basically an alcohol gel. Think of something like hair gel with alcohol in it. It's this wonderful, mysterious blue color. And so, these operations, you put out a section, you've got to time it, and then you clean it off. And if you're good and consistent, then it comes out even. And I'm really happy with the way the floor and the floors and the walls, kind of balanced out. Right. If you do it right, you don't see sections or anything. It just kind of magically comes clean. The bathroom floor, with all those inlays, had taken kind of a beating over the years. There was a nice collection in our fragments collection of inlays that popped out, and putting those back is like doing a 12-piece jigsaw puzzle. It's super simple, but there were, because they only fit in one place. But there were some missing bits, and this is the area under the sink, which was particularly damaged because of water leaks from the sink, which carry a lot of salts, which then effloresce and push the little marble bits off. The area right in front of the doorway, of course, there was a lot of missing bits there, so those got filled and magically disappeared. Like I said, you can do a lot with nice artist colors and a little brush. The marble jali themselves. You can imagine interns and volunteers, little tiny cotton swabs, doing this for hours and hours and hours. I thought, well, we don't need to do that. Fortunately, they didn't need very much, and that's one of the joys of this space, is that all of our marble trims and things, they're almost pristine. And really what they needed was just a wash. And so I thought about it, and I figured out the system. We just went out and bought some of these pressurized bottles, and you put one person on one side with a towel and the other person on the other side, and you get them all soaked up and then rinse them with this spray. And so this is what you see here. You can see Napua on the outside and Gilbert on the inside, and Napua on the outside here holding up a towel. Worked very well. Okay, so sometime in this last summer, we traditionally have interns here in the summer from the training programs, conservation training programs, in particular from the one at University of Delaware at Winterthur, and last summer was no exception. They had a project that they wrapped up looking at one of the Syrian room ceilings, and they did it very efficiently and finished somewhat early, so I co-opted them to help us with work on the Mughal suite. So this is Nick Pedimonti and Nicole Peters, both Nicks, both NP. Anyway, Nick is from the Winterthur program, and Nicole is from a program at State University of New York at Buffalo. And so they joined us on a number of projects, Nick working on the fireplace and Nicole working on one of the drawers to the mother of pearl chests. But it turns out we had two broken Krishnas that belonged in the bedroom, and so each of them got one to work on. And what is going on with this poor Krishna? These things had not seen the light of day in many years, and in fact the other one was broken at the ankles many years ago, and I'd never seen it standing up. It's kind of a classic case of old repairs gone bad. The arm on this one was repaired with a piece of just mild steel, which you can see sticking out here, and as we know, steel rusts, and so the pressure of the expanding corrosion just blows the stone apart. So we disassembled that. Here I'm demonstrating physical violence, showing Nicole did this treatment, but I was showing her how you can kind of drill out these holes, replace the steel with stainless steel, put them all back together, filled the losses, and painted them. They both did wonderful jobs. This is the other Krishna with the broken ankles. This one particularly difficult because at ankles the things want to torque, so you can see all the various straps, one around the neck and little wedges and clamps and things that we needed to get it just in the right position. And again, this by Nick. Oh, hey, let's go carpet shopping. We had a fun time bringing in all these carpets from various sources and rolled them out just like in the souk. And some of them were really spectacular, too spectacular, in fact. I think it was this one that had some silk in it. It was really shimmery and lustrous, but it would have just detracted from what we were trying to show off. So we ended up with the one that you see on display. We couldn't put a historic textile down because then you'd have to just kind of walk around the edges like this. And we wanted people to have the experience of walking into the room and experiencing the space. All right. And I do want to show one photograph of our exhibition space, which was formerly a closet. A great opportunity, sort of a blank slate, if you will, to inject a little bit of didactic material into Shangri-La. This is like the one space that didn't have a decorative program where we could do that and actually bring some images of Doris and some text in for people to see. And the Mughal suite isn't just the interior rooms. It also includes the garden and the lanai, both of which are very charming in and of themselves. In getting ready for this exhibit, Sharon is spending time here and going around and what should we do with this? What should we do with that? And she relocated this bench, the one that you see out there today, which appears in this archival photograph. It was ignominiously bound up with duct tape and jammed in a closet off the Damascus room. The work on this was done by our staff, except for the paint job, which we sent it out to be painted. But Freddie Holmes and primarily along with Bill, they replaced some of the ends of the legs that were attacked by insects, dismembered the thing, sanded everything, put it all back together, made every repair, built this substructure for this so that people can sit on it without stressing the original. Kudos to them. This is another interesting feature of the private lanai and garden, is this plaster work in these arches, which was purpose made for this spot. Plaster of Paris, out of doors, is not very happy. And this is no exception. It had been painted and painted and painted and painted. And paint layers, when they get that thick, start to have a mind of their own and start pulling away, allowing water to run in underneath. And plaster of Paris is slightly water soluble. Some had suggested that we scrap these. I said, no, let's see what we can do with them. And so we had some of our good friends from Higa Painting. It was like product placement, right? But they do a great job. Came and stripped the paint off. Underneath, it was pretty gnarly with big passages eroded away, and some damage from iron armatures inside. All the usual suspects, right? But we took it apart, filled the losses, and then another specially designed coating system which should protect them sufficiently. But you can't just sort of fix one part and not the other. So the little drip line up above had to be repaired. There's Freddie and Tyga, two of our staff. And the garden got a lot of work too, trying to bring it back to kind of the way it appears in historic photographs. Steve, our gardener, and I don't know if that's Ferdy or Jamie fishing the leaves. OSHA, don't pay any attention. Right? So it was really a cast of thousands, and everybody did a terrific job. And then finally you get to the end where you do the last installations, and these are a couple of photographs that were taken by Linnie Morris, sort of at the end of the photo shoot where she's getting a little punchy. She tells me, "Oh, just go look like you're doing something." Okay, but then she took Bethany and posed her like a Vermeer painting with this glowy light coming up. Like, okay. No, but actually I have to say the installation went really smoothly, thanks to everybody's efforts. So a couple last before and after shots. Again, nobody's saying, gee, I miss that yellow, right? And I like this one in that it reminds you that this, although we have the Jali closed for much of the time when visitors are there, it's really about this kind of indoor-outdoor experience. Can you imagine waking up from a nap at 3 in the afternoon and looking out and seeing this? It's terrific. And so there we are back at the beginning. Thank you all for coming. Yeah.